William Clyde Gibson is a name that strikes fear into even the most seasoned minds. Born and raised in Indiana, you might be considered a normal guy by your neighbors. But beneath his facade is a dark mind obsessed with violence and death. Gibson was convicted of 3 murders, but the government received a count that may have been higher than 3. The coldness of his confession, along with the details of how he mutilated and ate his victims, has made him one of the most vile killers America has ever known. Sitting in solitary confinement, awaiting execution, Gibson keeps his eyes dead, as if human life is a meaningless concept. The stories that surround him not only reveal a wandering mind, but also raise the terrifying question: how can a person become a monster in the midst of normal life? And more importantly, how many such monsters are out there? Henry Eugene Hodges is the embodiment of evil that never sleeps. Born in Tennessee to a broken and violent family, he grew up amidst psychological wounds that never healed. Hodges was not only a murderer, but also a hunter at will, choosing gay men as his targets and then striking with cold air. The 3 confirmed cyber attacks are just the tip of the iceberg, as investigators believe the real number is much higher. Even in captivity in a maximum security prison, the warrior remained a direct threat, constantly attacking guards, causing chaos and defying all rules. Without hatred, without hunger for death, Hodges faced his death sentence with a blank stare and a mocking smile, as if even death could not advance to tyranny. The story of Henry Eugene Hodges is not only a criminal record beside him, but also a bitter reminder that even behind iron, darkness can still creep in and thrive. Thomas Eugene Creech, one of America's most notorious death row inmates, created a legal system in Idaho that questioned the limits of justice. Born into a troubled life, Creech soon descended into a life of brutal murder that spanned multiple states. Convicted of 3 murders, Creech himself murdered 42 victims, enough to make him one of the most brutal serial killers in modern history. During his half-century incarceration, Creech was not only Idaho's longest-serving death row inmate, but also escaped multiple times due to legal disputes and technicalities during his execution. The beast's attitude toward death was not one of fear, but of incomprehensible danger, as anything but a feeling of tension in humans. The story of Thomas Eugene Creech is not just about a crime, but also a mirror of reality. Sometimes, even when justice is declared, its implementation remains a never-ending battle. Timothy Joseph McGee was the nightmare of Los Angeles in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The leader of a notorious gang in the Atwater Village area, Purple is believed to have ordered or directly carried out at least 12 murders, including those of rivals and innocent people who were killed by his sudden appearance. McGee controlled the area with pure violence, instilling such fear that many witnesses chose to remain silent rather than face the consequences. When he was arrested, the violent thug showed no anger and even bragged about his brutal reputation. McGee's trial became one of the most dangerous in California at the time, with testimony revealing a network of murder, money laundering, and psychological terror. Mark was originally sentenced to death, but years later a project reshot this version due to deals issues, allowing Mark to live on after his ironclad song instead of being executed. The story of Timothy Joseph McGee is a testament to how power, when built on blood and fear, can make people believe they are untouchable until justice comes. Daniel Joseph Blank was a name that struck fear in the River Parishes, Louisiana, community in the late 1990s. Coming from a working-class family, Qua was considered a quiet, reserved man, but behind his exterior was a cold-blooded predator who targeted the elderly because he believed they were weak and vulnerable. Blank broke into his victims' homes at night, killing them with knives or other crude weapons, then ransacking them for money and valuables. The 6th brutal killer warned that a large-scale investigation, combining forensics and witness testimony, was needed to find clues. When he was arrested, Blank appeared calm, almost emotionless about his crimes. Here, the technician continued to receive cover, but the evidence gathered was enough to end the suicide image. Daniel Joseph Blank's story not only vividly portrays a dangerous serial killer, but also reminds us that sometimes monsters can lurk behind the most harmless faces. Donald Broadnax was a stalker who, despite being given a chance to start his life over, chose to return to the dark path of crime. Originally from Alabama, Broadnax was once sentenced to prison for murder, but after many years of serving his sentence, he was pardoned, a decision that many later considered too expensive. Immediately after his release from prison, he beat and murdered his wife and her nephew, then tried to cover up his brutal crimes. What the police found at the scene deeply portrayed a man without any humanity, ready to kill himself. Broadnax's trial quickly attracted public attention, both because of the urgent nature of the case and because of Bao Bao's question: where did the legal system go wrong in giving a fool a chance to reoffend? Currently, while in prison, Broadnax still maintains a calm face, as if he has never held any grudges. Beat's story is a dangerous warning that violence can sometimes be undone and that an opportunity can lead to irreversible tragedy. Ted Bundy was one of the most notorious serial killers in American history, a charming man who hid a dark soul. Born in 1946, Bundy was intelligent, charismatic, and easy to make friends, but those qualities became deadly weapons. During the 1970s, Bundy kidnapped, tortured, and murdered at least 30 young women, mostly college students, and the real number may have been much higher. Bundy often pretended to close businesses or posed as government officials to continue saying goodbye to employees, then took them to residences near where his horrific crimes would occur. Bundy's case shocked the nation, not only because of his brutal speed, but also because he twice escaped from police, continuing to kill while on the run. When he was recaptured and tried, he defended himself, turning the courtroom into a theater of arrogance and vanity. On January 24, 1989, Bundy was executed by electronic means, opening one of the darkest and most tense periods in American criminal history. John Wayne Gacy is one of the most influential serial killers in American history, not only because of the number of victims he killed, but also because of the way he lived his life. Born in Chicago in 1942, Gacy was known to the community as a successful businessman, actively involved in charity work, and often dressed up as Pogo the Clown to perform for children. But behind that cheerful exterior was a sick predator. From 1972 to 1978, Gacy tricked, lured, or kidnapped at least 33 teenagers and young men, sexually assaulting and brutally murdering them. Most of them were buried under the floorboards of his home, while the rest were dumped in the river. The case was uncovered after one character escaped, leading to a series of horrifying evidence warnings. When he was arrested, Gacy appeared calm, even smiling, as if he had no disgust for what he had done. In 1994, Gacy was executed by lethal injection, ending the life of the murderer, but leaving behind a legacy of crime that America will never forget. Richard Gerald Jordan is the longest-serving death row inmate in Mississippi history, a case that has puzzled the legal system and the public for decades. Convicted in 1976 for the kidnapping and murder of a wealthy woman for ransom, Jordan was in his early 20s. He planned meticulously, feigning help to approach his victim, then holding her captive and murdering her in cold blood. The death sentence was quickly handed down, but the case has since become an endless legal maelstrom. Multiple appeals, retrials, and changes to the execution method have kept Jordan on death row for nearly half a century, a rare stretch in American history. During that time, he has aged behind bars, watching fellow inmates being executed while he himself lived, awaiting an outcome that has yet to come. To some, Jordan is a cold-blooded killer who should have paid for his crimes long ago. To others, his story reflects the loopholes and unnecessary lengths in the American death penalty system. By any measure, it remains a haunting case. Byron Black has just completed one of Tennessee's most controversial executions. Convicted in 1988 for murdering his girlfriend and her 2 children in a cold rage, Black spent more than 3 decades on death row, becoming one of the state's longest-serving inmates. During his time in prison, his health deteriorated, he suffered from chronic illnesses, and he had a defibrillator implanted in his chest. As his execution date approached, lawyers and human rights groups called for a delay, concerned that the lethal injection could trigger the device and cause an extremely painful death. However, the request was rejected, and Byron Black walked calmly into the death chamber, leaving only a few brief, final words. Witnesses said he cried out in pain as the drugs took effect, an image that deeply divided the public. For many, it was final justice for a brutal crime, but to others, it is a reminder of the fine line between law enforcement and humanity.